Everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to do something pretty interesting. We're going to build an entire worldview, basically from scratch. We'll start with just a list of words, core concepts, actions, ideas, and piece them together, kind of like a puzzle, to see the whole picture. So yeah, let's dive right in.
It's a fair question, right? How can a simple vocabulary list tell you a story about faith and life and the entire universe? Well, think of it like this. Each word is a puzzle piece, and by figuring out where each piece goes, by putting them in their logical place, this huge, coherent picture starts to take shape.
So, where do we even begin? Well, every big structure needs a solid foundation. So, we're going to start with the core creed. This is the absolute bedrock of belief that everything else, and I mean everything, gets built on top of.
And the very first building block, the first choice you have to make, is a huge one. The whole thing starts with this concept of monotheism, the belief in one single God. And that's in direct contrast to polytheism, the belief in many gods. This one distinction right here sets the stage for literally everything that follows.
Okay, so to support that monotheistic foundation, the worldview adds some really key elements. You've got the Holy Quran, that's the scripture. You have the prophet, the messenger, and then you have the existence of unseen beings, like angels. But what's really crucial here is that this framework isn't just about blind faith. It's presented as a system that's supported by its own proofs and evidences.
Belief is one thing, for sure. But how does all that actually translate into daily life? From your head to your hands. Let's move on and see how this whole thing shifts from just believing something to actually doing something.
So this worldview, it lays out what it calls the right path. And this path is really defined by a few key obligations. First, to pray. That's the direct connection to the divine. Next up is charity, which is an obligation you have to your community. And finally, honoring one's parents, a foundational duty to your own family. See how that works? It's a path that connects God, community, and family all together.
And within these practices, you find some really specific principles. Take the term hijab. Now, a lot of people might immediately think of a headscarf, but in this worldview, it's actually a much broader principle of modesty. It applies to your conduct, your speech, and your dress for both men and women. It's kind of like an external expression of an internal state of being mindful.
These practices, of course, they're anchored in specific places and rituals. The mosque serves as that communal space for prayer and connection. And then you have acts like sacrifice, which are these powerful, very personal expressions of devotion, obedience, and remembrance. Okay, so we've got belief and we've got practice. Next up, let's explore the ethical framework that's meant to guide a person's character and how they interact with the world. This is their moral compass.
At the absolute heart of this moral system is this really powerful distinction. On one side, you have virtue. That's basically any action that aligns with the right path. We're talking qualities like compassion, patience, gratitude. And on the other side, its opposite is vice. This represents any deviation from that path, so acts of greed, envy, or cruelty. Every single moral choice is seen as navigating between these two poles.
And that brings us right to a core conflict in this moral code. Truth is held up as a fundamental virtue. And it doesn't just mean honesty in what you say, but integrity in everything you do. Its direct opposite, the lie, is therefore seen as this deeply corrupting vice. So trustworthiness becomes an absolute cornerstone of a moral character.
So how does this moral compass actually work in society? Well, the whole concept of justice is framed as this delicate balance. It's built on the relationship between your rights, what you're entitled to receive, and your obligations, what you owe to other people. In this view, a truly fair and just society can only happen when there's mutual responsibility.
So the crucial point here is that a believer is meant to be actively cultivating these specific traits. The goal is to literally build your character through kindness, by upholding honesty, by practicing tolerance, engaging in cooperation, and maintaining a state of purity. These aren't just, nice suggestions. They are the active goals of a moral life.
All right, now let's zoom all the way out. From daily actions and ethics, we're going to move to the ultimate questions. Where is all of this headed? This final section looks at the grand narrative of existence, the whole shebang.
This worldview presents a very clear sequence for the end of our earthly journey. It starts with death, which isn't seen as an end, but more of a transition. That leads to a judgment day, which is a moment of total accountability. And that in turn opens the door to the afterlife. And in that afterlife, there are two potential outcomes. On one hand, you have paradise, which is described as a place of rewards for a life lived with virtue and faith. And in contrast, there's hell, a place of punishment for a life of vice and disbelief. This idea of ultimate accountability is absolutely central.
Woven into this entire journey, from beginning to end, is the concept of fate. This is the idea that there's a divine plan or a destiny. It really speaks to a universe that isn't just random, but is part of a much larger, purposeful design.
So there we have it. We've taken these individual words, these puzzle pieces, and we've assembled them into a whole system of belief, practice, ethics, and destiny. We started with a simple list and ended up with a pretty complete picture. So the final question I want to leave you with is this. If you look at all these pieces together, what is the story they tell about a person's purpose and their place in the universe?